Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. When the punishment doesn't fit the crime, what's next? Who better to answer that question than a criminal attorney for more than 25 years, both a prosecutor and defense attorney, now one determined writer. Rob Jensen, tell us about No Goodbyes.
So a long time ago, I was in the Army when I first started prosecuting. I had heard a story. I was in a Humvee. Why I was in a Humvee and what I was doing in the Army really isn't all that interesting. But I had heard a story of a young mother, a mother-to-be actually, late-term mother who was in a car accident, and she died and the baby died. And it was a tragic story. And the reporter was saying that the person felt really bad and was going to be prosecuted and was going to do some trivial amount of time. And I thought, that's, what a tragic story. And I felt really bad, obviously, about the story. And then I thought, that's just ridiculous that person's only going to do such a little bit amount of time, even if they just felt that it was an accident. The criminal justice system is just going to fail that family. And I thought, the gut reaction to that is somebody's going to want to get revenge for that. And the person who would get revenge for that would certainly do so much more time than the person who committed that atrocity in the first place. And I thought, isn't that interesting, that the person, I grew up in a very tough neighborhood outside of Philadelphia. And, anybody's gut reaction for revenge, would you be able to get revenge, and get away with it? And what would that look like? And so that was the idea of the book. And can anybody really ever get revenge and not have any collateral consequences to that? And so that was the genesis of the book. That's one of the themes of the book.
Interesting.
And the book starts with that event, that there's this accident, this young mother to be in an ambulance, and it's broadsided in the main line outside of Philadelphia. So that's taken directly from my experience in that Humvee where I heard that story. So that is the genesis of the idea for the book. This socialite that is in the accident gets away with it. It's really a book with interlocking stories. So I was influenced by Pulp Fiction and Crash and a lot of these, what I found out later to be this way of writing that are these hyperlink stories or networking narrative stories,
okay,
where you have several different seemingly disparate stories that interlock eventually, sort of the way Game of Thrones is written.
Right.
I didn't realize this as I was writing this 20-something years ago, the first draft.
So you wrote this a long time ago.
I did. I started the book in 2000. I was
okay.
I was in the Army, and it took me several years, about 3 years, to finish the first draft. And then it's editing, and you put it off to the side, and you pick it back up again, and it's been this labor of love for years.
So why did you decide to publish it now?
It really was something that it sat in a box, and then I picked it back up, and then I finished. It's a trilogy, actually, and this is just the first of 3 books. Okay. And so the publisher, I eventually finished the third of the trilogy over the pandemic. This was finished through the pandemic.
A pandemic book.
That's right.
So many of them.
That's right. So I was spurned to finish the trilogy over the pandemic. So Michael Graman is the lawyer in the book, and so he is a man that is sort of beaten down. He starts his life like so many of us. He marries his college sweetheart, and they have this idea of what their life is gonna look like. He becomes a lawyer. She's a teacher. They think that they are going to have the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence. And you fast forward, and their life just hasn't materialized the way that they thought it was going to be. He's frustrated, and she's frustrated. They suffer a series of miscarriages and fits and starts, and their marriage is just not what either of them thought it was going to be. And they're both frustrated with each other and with their life. And they don't really know where to turn. And he has a secretary that is way too young and way too beautiful. And he knows it, and his wife knows it. And he is incapable of firing her. A mysterious client comes into his office offering easy money. And in the legal profession, we know that it's not necessarily the clients that you take that are the keys to success, but the clients that you do not take. And Michael has a decision to make, and makes some bad decisions, as he's made throughout his career, and makes a bad decision here. And then we follow the stories that go from there. So like I said, it's a series of interlocking stories that eventually take you together into the same network.
So if you were inspired by Pulp Fiction, I imagine it takes a pretty dark turn.
It does, yeah. There's there's violence, there's sex.
Okay.
Yes. I'd say it's R-rated.
It's an R-rated book. All right. So where do you leave us? I guess the first book then is a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, it was designed to stand alone. And then I love these characters. And besides Michael and his wife and this mysterious client, there's also a third setting set in upstate Pennsylvania, where you have this small sheriff's department with this sheriff and his deputy, and some of the folks set in this small town of hunting community. A series of cabins up in upstate Pennsylvania, and this mainline community outside of Philadelphia. And each one of them had their own dynamic and the way they interact with each other. So the idea here is that if I can take a step back, Alice, as we grow up, my whole idea of good versus evil, and all of us, I guess, as we grow up, was, we teach our kids, hey, do good and don't do bad. And, when we grew up, it was so easy. The good guy was wearing the white hat and the bad guy was wearing the black hat, right? And so, do the good thing, don't do the bad thing. But as we got older, we realized it's so much more nuanced than that, right?
Yeah.
And when I became a prosecutor and a defense attorney, it's so much more layered and much more nuanced than just do good and don't do bad. If we were just operating in two dimensions, somebody does something wrong and you just say, okay, in two dimensions, that guy's a bad guy, put him in jail, right?
Right.
But if you start looking at things in a little bit more layered or nuanced ways, you start to say, like in Les Miserables and Jean Valjean, why does he steal the bread? He steals the bread because he's trying to feed his family. Right. If you start to put yourself in the shoes of people and why they are motivated to take action, now things are a little bit harder to say that somebody's just a bad person, right? Right. And so all of my characters, I tried to stand in their shoes, and I'm hoping that the readers stand in their shoes and at least understand the motivations for why they're acting. And so there really is no particular protagonist. So why does Michael do what he's doing? Why does his wife Sarah do what she's doing? Why do their characters take the arc that they're taking? And then in the end, at least at the end of this book, is that satisfying? Did their actions make sense? And I'm hoping they do.
But it's not necessarily, it's not as black and white. It's not black and white, obviously.
No, it never is. And that's what I learned prosecuting and then defending people. There's the common saying that the villain is the hero of his own story. Right. And I think that makes so much sense. I mean, if you can just kind of stand in the shoes of somebody, where somebody was when they decided to make the decisions that they make. Now, you've got people who are mentally unbalanced, and sometimes their decisions don't make a lot of sense. And
right.
They need they need help. But many times, when somebody makes a decision, you might not agree with the decision that they make, and there are times that people need to be punished for the decisions that they make. But at least you understand the decision that they made.
Right.
Right. And that's what I found in the course of 25 years of doing criminal law, that just understanding the decision, that's half of the battle, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's where I've come to. It's not so black and white anymore. Everything is the field of gray.
Yeah.
It's really just how strong revenge is, and can you get away from really taking revenge? Do you ever truly get away from the concept of revenge and the tentacles that has that has taken in you, right? The old concept of when you take revenge, dig 2 graves. So this mysterious client comes in, and it really does go from there. So there's a lot of characters. They all come together at the end, and there are no protagonists. And just like life, like look around, there are no heroes, there are no villains. If I could tell you that one person is carrying this story throughout, that's not true. That doesn't happen in life. Everybody is the hero and everybody is the villain. And that happens throughout all of these books. And honestly, those are the books that I like to read. I don't like reading books or watching movies where it's just one person and they're the only person who carries the moral center of the story.
Okay.
In my professional life, I have realized that that's just not reality. There are a lot of heroes, or really there are no heroes.
When you look up your book online, does the description give anything away?
It does not. Michael Grauman is a middle-aged attorney. He's got a struggling practice and he's got a failing marriage. And against his better judgment, he accepts a new client, and it offers him a chance at getting fast money. And it drags him into this web of deceit and revenge and murder. And it really threatens to destroy his life. It's so funny, like never is anything black and white anymore, right? Like when we're young, everything was black and white. And the older I get, the less I realize anything was ever black and white. Everything is in the gray.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I tell my son, I'm like, the older I get, the less I realize I know.
Right.
I know
exactly.
so little now, the older I get. Can I say something else?
You absolutely can.
It's so funny. People ask me, are you proud of writing, this book? And I say, I've written for 25 years. I'm a lawyer. We write and we read every day. But, of course, being a published author, it's a different experience because this is, it's a different thing altogether. This is coming from my mind, and then it comes out onto the page, and now it's in a book form, and then I hand that over to you. You read the pages and you interpret my words into your own sense, and then you're taking from that. And there's this sense of vulnerability that I just think is so surreal. But I'm so honored that people take their time to do that. I'm a 51-year-old father and husband. And as I get older, the thing that I just value so much, and perhaps there's other 51-year-old fathers out there that think the same thing. The thing I value so much is the one thing I can never replace, and that's time. So for anybody to take their time to read my book, I just am so honored that anybody would do that. And I hope that when you get to the last page of my book and you close it, you take a deep breath and you think, that was worth my time. When I read someone's book and I close the page and I take a deep breath, I just want them to know I appreciate that and that was worth my time. And I hope my readers are.
Yeah. And it left an impression on you. I like a book where I'm thinking about it. I think about that book. I think about that character. That character was so rich and so deep.
That's right. Because isn't that what art is?
Yeah.
Isn't art doing something that evokes some response? No matter what it is, just you trying to evoke a response from somebody. Isn't that what art is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm honored to speak with you, and it really is my honor and my privilege.
You have a great day.
Thanks, Alice.
Bye-bye. No shortage of writing skills from our next author, Debbie Bradshaw-Badois, which came in handy when she decided to share some painful personal experiences in her book, Dethroning Your Personal Tyrants. So you're an educator, correct?
I'm an education consultant. So I consult with area universities. So I'm not actually at one university, but I do instruct writing, and I also help with undergrad and graduate level critical writing analysis, as well as recruiting people to get into college. My book, I would say, was really from the backbone of my own personal experience and anecdotes, but because I have that writing skill and that writing background and instruct writing, it sort of manifested. It was like the genesis of my past, and then kind of culminated from there.
Because it's interesting. It's about, releasing emotional blocks and negative events and people and
Yes,
relationships. All of those things can block you from writing
absolutely.
or from expressing
Absolutely.
yourself creatively.
Yes, as I mentioned before, it was a culmination of years of wounds from a painful past. And through my journey of like therapy and extensive research on emotional healing with actual psychologists, and then as well as some experts who I reference in my book, I began to, it sort of was a journal exercise for me personally. And then through the art of journaling, because I instruct writing, it kind of took on a beast of its own, so to speak, and it manifested into a book on personal growth. Okay. And so, although, through this journey, I write about my anecdotes that help bring me clarity during a painful time in my past. But through those anecdotes, it's pretty much the foundation of the journey that helped me heal, to dethrone the tyrants in one's life. And then I offer a sort of, chapters outlining what helped me bring me clarity and help me bring me into where I am today, and whole and heal and peaceful. And I feel like that when we talk about tyrants, it's such a strong word. Tyrants don't always have to be people. I reference this in my book. For me, it was individuals, it was broken relationships, it was, abandonment issues, it was all of this. Okay. And everybody has a story, obviously. But tyrants also could be painful memories, events. It could be personal addictions or vices that people remain held hostage, so to speak, and stagnant in their life, and it prevents an individual from moving forward in a healthy manner. So, in the introduction of my book, it outlines the purpose for my story, and then I have a prologue which actually discusses years from all the way back till I was 3.5. I'm in my late 50s now, so it's been a journey of like a 50-year healing, and some people never get over that, and how those effects during childhood really were brought into all of my adult relationships.
Like,
And
what do you mind me asking what happened?
sure, no, not at all. So I would say in the very beginning, my mother abandoned my siblings and I. It kind of manifested from abandonment issues, and you're gonna read about that, and our readers will read about that in the introduction in my story, that was sort of the birth of this book, because of the abandonment issues. My father was very present in my life throughout my entire life, but my mother sort of came in and out, and she left my father 2-3 times. He divorced her, but he also brought her back. Okay. And through this journey, she also brought a lot of destruction into our lives through that abandonment. And as you go through the book, you will, it kind of outlines what the effects of that did on our family, not just me, but our family. And later on in my father's life, after he developed Parkinson's, just what she did to him by him succumbing to her as a bit of she was his kryptonite, I should say. And so witnessing that, I kind of, take the reader on the journey of those abandonment issues were brought also into my own relationships and with an ex-husband and, another reconnection, and how I viewed relationships after that, because broken individuals, unless you're healed, you attract unhealed people, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so during my life, what I had to do is learn how to dethrone what the tyrants who would, and my biggest was my mother, obviously. Right. That tyrant of that stagnant that was keeping me, I didn't realize it was holding me from moving forward. And then I developed codependencies on anybody else in my relationship because I became an overgiver, an overpleaser during that time period, because I screamed that I wasn't enough for my mother. She kept abandoning us. Okay. So how am I supposed to be enough for anybody? Okay. And so you develop as an individual, you develop perfectionism, you develop ways where you just continue to rise and be the best you can be, because there was a void that happened in your life. And until you can take your throne back of your life, and I'm just saying, I'm using my experience. Everybody is different. Until you can take your power back, Alice, then through the book, it outlines how I did that. Okay. After years and years of just, being on kind of like an emotional hamster wheel of codependencies and not really realizing my own self-worth through that journey. And then dethroning those tyrants that were keeping me from living whole and healthy, and recognizing what an actual normal relationship was, because I did not have that model in my life in those formative years.
How long before you were able to get help?
So I would say I was in my 40s, and I began the process of, I knew that I was struggling through this. I also in my 20s, and I explained that when I left Cincinnati and I went to California to attend college, and then I got into a relationship very fast, and I kind of trauma bonded with another individual. He was kind of my first love. And I reference him, of course, names have been changed. And he also had a very tumultuous upbringing, and that is explored through the book as well. And again, Alice, because I couldn't recognize it, that as I progressed through the years of adulthood, I couldn't recognize it. I kept attracting broken men or broken individuals because I was broken, and I couldn't, so it trauma bonds you, and right. It doesn't make it right. Two wrongs don't make a right, obviously. Right. And so what happened to me is I developed a bladder condition when I was in California in the 80s. And it sort of kind of hindered my ability to move on with this individual. And I moved back to Cincinnati to start, getting myself healthy and whole again. I also explore that in the book. I have interstitial cystitis, and it wasn't recognized by the medical community until the late 80s. And until I could get myself healthy and whole, I actually started seeing a pain psychologist during that time that I was, trying to get healthy physically. And that's when I kind of started recognizing things, but I was so focused on my health at that time. But I would say, as far as my emotional healing, it probably wasn't until after I was married 22 years, divorced, and then I went on that journey of healing.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So it must be really important for you to try to reach the people who need this book the most.
Absolutely, because I feel like I referenced, it's about letting go of a painful past. It's about, first of all, you have to forgive yourself, right? And then you can forgive others. And that is, making the commitment to forgive yourself for allowing all of that baggage to keep you held hostage for decades. you have to forgive yourself for that. Okay. And then you start, because obviously, there's an old cliche that they say, you can harvest bitterness and be scorned, but it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Right. And what I've had to learn to do is release that these individuals in my life, who offended, the memories, the events, whatever, they're not losing sleep over the offense. Okay. And karma doesn't miss anybody's address. Okay. So even though I've had to detoxify my life as well and dethrone those individuals out of my life, I know that I'm better and I'm healthier and stronger for it. And I know that they're not losing sleep over what they've done, because I have to almost have pity on them because they're unhealed and they're hurt. Okay. So the hurt starts somewhere. Hurt people, right? So, and it took me a lot of years, a lot of, educating myself, and then therapy. And I honestly, Alice, I was in therapy maybe 5 years.
Wow.
But through that 5-year time period, the exercise, the thing that was so therapeutic for me was writing. So it manifested into, this has been, I had a little bit of a fear of the unknown, how to, it's not necessarily a memoir, but there had to be a foundation of my personal experience so that the reader is looking through the lens of my life. Okay. But then, it's outlined with making the commitment to free yourself. How did I do that? Making the, and then forgiving myself first, and then others. And then, of course, the biggest chapter in the book is dethroning your personal tyrants and taking back your personal power, and then understanding your wounded self, and then actions to practice self-love. And all of this is outlined in sort of compartmentalized, and then going back to reference my experiences in my past, and then how I went on that journey to do each one of those steps.
Thank you for sharing all of this. And funny that you become a writing teacher, and you encourage kids, students to write every day. That's kind of amazing that your life kind of completed the circle.
Let me tell you what my baby is, I would say, is, so as an educational consultant, I mentioned to you, so I really work with like college level. But one of the things I've been doing as an independent consultant for 30 years is I help students with the college essay to get into college. Okay. Right. And I've developed my own format because I've worked with admissions all over the United States. I know exactly what they want to see. And so one of the things that whenever I sit down and I frame that, the art of writing the perfect college essay, I go over with students and talk to them about that. No university wants to see sunshine and roses and unicorns and lollipops, because that's just not real. Right. Okay. We want to see who you are, and if you're able to, accept the challenge of what university life is going to be like, and are you going to be a critical thinker and problem solver? And so I've taught people how to write about a challenge that they've overcome, and then where they are. So I feel like as on my journey to advocate for this, for students to write like that, I had to take a piece of my own advice and write like that.
Amazing.
And share.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with me.
You're so welcome, Alice. I appreciate the interview.
You got it. You have a great day.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Carrie Rickert is a trauma and business coach who brings her own personal trauma and experience to the table in her book, Trauma is a Catalyst. Tell us what happened last summer that made you decide to write this book.
I had taken part in an anthology, and I wrote a chapter for that, and it was on stories of traumatic brain injury survivors and the importance of post-acute care. And with the publication of that book, I thought, you know what, I really can tell my story in a bigger way than this. And so that's what was the catalyst for writing Trauma is a Catalyst.
What is your story?
So Trauma is a Catalyst is about my life-changing car accident and subsequent brain injury, as well as lots and lots of other things that occurred as a result of the accident. And it goes through, it actually, the first part of the book is my mom's journal entries from when I was in the hospital.
How old were you?
37. I was newly separated. I had 2 kids that were 8 and 4 at the time. So the first part of the book is my mom's my mom's journal entries. So it's really from her perspective what was going on with me. And then the second part of the book is a blog that I wrote that I wrote during that first post-acute recovery period. And that was me processing through all of the things that had changed for me as a result of this accident, both good and bad, and, how I was sort of managing my life as a person who had experienced this kind of severe trauma. And then the last part is really like more me now. So it's kind of a culmination of all of those things that I have learned along the way, and how it's all kind of shaken out and how I am continuing to learn and grow.
What's the most significant thing that you share in this book?
I think the most significant thing is just a sense of connection and a spark of hope. Trauma can be really isolating. As people are going through trauma, they feel like they are all alone, even if they have a tremendous support system, which I did. I had a wonderful support system. And yet I still felt like no one really understood what I was going through. And I think part of that is because people don't really talk about their traumatic experiences. So I feel like by talking about my trauma, it gives me an opportunity to really give people that sense of connection, to show them that they are not alone, and to give them a spark of hope. Like, I managed to overcome this. There's no reason that you can't overcome your challenges.
This was a car accident?
Yes.
And what do you remember?
Very little. I remember, actually, my last memory of the day is riding down the elevator with my friend and coworker, Emily, who was actually in the car accident with me, and our conversation in the elevator. I don't remember getting in the car. I don't remember driving. I don't remember the accident at all. It was evidently raining really, really hard, and I hydroplaned into the back of a tractor trailer. Oh
my gosh.
Yes.
Now, what did you do before the accident? What was your career?
I was a management consultant. I worked at a small management consulting firm in Baltimore, and it was a very high-paced, fun kind of atmosphere. I got to work with clients all over the state of Maryland, and and with the goal of helping them grow. And
you were not able to go back to doing that?
I tried. I tried, and probably tried way too soon. But I have I have a serious drive and lots of perseverance. So I thought, oh, okay, I can do this. And 2 weeks into it, I was like, and I really can't do this at this time. I'm not ready.
How long did it take you to recover?
So I was in acute care in the hospital for 4 weeks. And then I was in rehab hospital for another 2 weeks. And then I was released home. I had to have another couple of surgeries. But for the most part, I was released home. But that wasn't really the end of my healing journey at all. There were a lot of things that I thought, oh, okay, I can do this now. Everything is fine. And it really wasn't. And so I had to learn how to be the new me, if you will. And I would say it was probably a solid year of active recovery. And then after that, I say I'm still recovering, right? And that's not to say that I feel like there's anything particularly wrong. I think it's more of a growth thing than it is recovery. I think healing and growth can go hand in hand.
Were there things you couldn't do anymore? Did your thought process change?
The biggest change for me is how quickly I became overwhelmed and tired.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate in that my brain injury, I recovered very, very well from it. Okay. I had some deficits, but they were not extreme deficits. I would occasionally misplace a word or, not have it on the tip of my tongue. But for the most part, it was this overwhelming feeling of exhaustion that would hit me out of the blue. And, and it would be after being in the car, which that one sort of makes sense, right? Yeah. After being in the car for like 30 minutes, I would have to have time to recover from that. Any kind of like go kind of day, like scheduled things back to back to back would wake me out. And it still does to a point. Now it just, the thing that I have been able to do is recognize the signs a little bit better and rest before I get to the point where it's going to knock me out for 2 days.
Now, are you able to talk to people that have suffered trauma, this kind of trauma?
That is actually what I do for a living. I coach people that have experienced trauma and help them sort of build a roadmap, from where they were before their trauma to where they are now and where they would like to see themselves in the future. That's
great. And you're able to share your book with them.
Yes, exactly.
Now you have like a handbook to take with you.
Yes, exactly. And that's really the biggest motivation I had for writing the book, was being able to expand my reach. So, I can only reach so many people, so many clients, right? Individually as one human being, but my book can reach millions of people.
Right.
And so that was really important for me. Once I decided that I would write the book, being able to have that kind of reach and to help as many people as possible, because I do know how hard it is. And having someone who knows how hard it is makes it that much better.
You are such a good person. You're going right up to heaven, girl. I'll tell you.
Thank you. Thank you. I try.
I mean, if there's a good thing that can come out of tragedy, you're a fine example of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There has to be a reason that I lived through all of this. I mean, at least for myself, right?
Yeah.
And if that reason is that I get to help more people, then, that's what I want to do.
Oh, so nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time today.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.